Well, hello everyone. This is Jenna from McGuire, and I hope you're having a good day. So lately I've been doing more fun fold card design videos, and people seem to like them, so I thought I'd do another today. This card design I call a double gatefold card. Now I've done something somewhat similar to this in the past, and I'll link to the video right here up on the top right if you'd like to check it out. But today's design has a more smooth look to it, thanks to a couple tricks that I have to share. So let's show you the first card, and you can see what it looks like. I think it's best to see it completed first. And you can see the fun double gatefold design and how the images kind of float there on the left. Now to do this card, you need to start with 2 note cards. They could really be any size, but I did 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You could use any cardstock, any size. Okay, so take one of these and open it up. And on that left-hand side, I'm going to draw a pencil line straight down the middle. In this case, the pencil line is at 2 1/8 of an inch. So this just gives me a little guide to help me with my placement. You can barely see it, but there is a pencil line halfway down on the left. I'm using the frame stamp that you see on the bottom of this Hero Arts Autumn Moon stamp set. I thought that would be a nice little frame for the floral image that I'll add later. I'm putting my card into my stamping tool. You don't need a stamping tool for this, but I wanted to try to center it as much as I could over that pencil line. I'll stamp this with VersaMark ink and add gold heat embossing for a fun gold frame. You could use absolutely any shape that you want here. Now on my other 2 cards, I'm going to use partial die cutting to allow this portion to flip when the card opens. However, in this case, I don't need to use a die because it's easy enough to cut myself. So on the right side of that pencil line, I'm going to cut along that frame. I'm just using this metal die here as a straight edge because I couldn't find mine, but I'm using a craft knife just to cut right along that frame. So if you have a coordinating die for your stamp, you can do the partial die cutting technique that I'll show you in a moment. But all I'm doing is cutting this image just on the right side of the pencil line. I rarely use my craft knife for actual cutting on my cards because I'm not good at it. However, I thought this was simple enough since it's all straight lines. Okay, so once I'm done, you can see that it's halfway cut out, and it's time to do the scoring. So I'm going to score at that same place right down the center, which is 2 1/8 of an inch. It doesn't matter what size card you make, you just want to score down the middle. And I'm only going to score above and below that frame, not through the frame, just above and below. That will allow it to flip when we fold it. So watch, I'm just going to fold that along that line, and you can see how the frame kind of flips, and we'll just go ahead and use the bone folder to reinforce that. So we've made one side of our gatefold card. You can see how it opens nicely, there's very little bulk to it, and that frame is kind of part of the card instead of just glued on top. Now it's time to take our other card that's cut to the same size, and we're going to make the other half of that gatefold. So I'll put this in, and I'm going to score down the middle. For this card, it's at 2 1/8 of an inch. We can then fold that over, and we'll have the other half of our gatefold card. If you want to save time, you could just do 2 pieces like this and glue a cutout frame to one of the flaps. But I really like that continuous look. So when I put the second piece into the first piece to form our card, you'll notice that there's a little gap there in the middle. So I'm going to take that card that we just created, the right half of the card, and just trim a little bit off the edge, just a hair. It'll help the card close nicely. You don't have to do this, but I like to remove that little bit of gap. So you can see now the 2 pieces fit better together and there's no space in the center. Okay, so I wanted to also add some stenciling to the entire front of this card, but I didn't want the stenciling to be inside the frame. I could have stamped the frame on some masking paper, cut it out, and put it over the frame. However, I thought it'd be easier to just tear up little pieces of reused masking tape so that I could protect that area when I stencil over it. But you could definitely create a mask if you prefer. Now I'm using strong liquid adhesive to glue the 2 backs together, And then I will bring the middles to meet and hold it there for a few seconds to make sure that everything stays together nicely. So now we can go ahead and stencil over the whole front. And I'm going to actually tuck that other half of the frame underneath the right side just so I don't have to put masking tape there too. Sometimes I do any little trick I can to save time. I'm using the Hero Arts Ornate Floral Stencil, and I'm going to position this over the front of my card. I really like this stencil because the center is kind of a focal point and it works its way out. So it works really well with this card where our focal point is in the center. It's just a beautiful stencil. I taped it down and I'm using a sponge to apply Hero Arts Soft Vanilla ink over the stencil. I'm kind of doing it a little uneven for some variation in the background. I think that's really pretty. And the soft vanilla ink is the right amount of ink, not too dark, not too light. It's perfect for stenciling. Now I can remove my little mask there, and there we have the frame perfect. For inside of my frame, I'll be using some images from the new My Monthly Hero kit from September. This is from Hero Arts. It's a kit that is worth twice the cost, so it's a great value. There is this large 6x8 stamp set with fall foliage images, which I'll be using. There are all the coordinating dies, a large frame die cut, and some other accessories. I went ahead and stamped, colored, and die cut a couple of the images from this set. I just use Copic markers, but you could color them however you want. To make the two images one, I'm gluing them together along the stems, and it gives a lot of dimension. I'll add this on to the frame of my card using both liquid adhesive and foam tape, so some areas stand up and some lay flat. You want to make sure to only glue to the left half of your card because you don't want to glue it shut, and there you can see the fun double gatefold card. Okay, for a sentiment, I used one from the Hero Arts Rain or Shine stamp set. This is an older set with really encouraging sentiments. I like to dig through older sets and find sentiments that I can use over again, and I thought Sending Warm Thoughts worked great for this card. I stamped it there on the bottom right panel, and here you can see the final card design. I added a little shimmer pen to some of my coloring just for a little bit of interest, and you can see how easy it is to create this double gatefold card by just cutting part of a frame image. Okay, my next card has something on both halves of the gatefold that come and meet in the middle. Now in this case, my images are a little more intricate. So instead of using a craft knife to cut them partially, I will do partial die cutting with the coordinating dies. This would work great with any stamps and coordinating dies that you may have. I find it best to start with a guide. This is a piece of scrap cardstock cut to the same size as my card, which will be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I drew a pencil line right down the center. I have stamped my images onto masking paper. I use Avery removable adhesive sheets and cut them out with the coordinating dies. I have 2 images that I kind of want to mirror along the card, and I'm just positioning them where I want them to end up being. I then will take the coordinating die and kind of pop it around one of the images. It'll pop right on there, and I'll run this through my die cut machine. So now I have a guide to where my image will be on my card. Again, I have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch side folding note card. I'm opening it up and drawing a pencil line halfway down at 2 1/8 of an inch, just like we did on the last card. I'm taking my guide and lining it up with that side and putting the mask right into the opening. I kind of ripped my mask there. Sorry, I used it many times trying to figure this out. Now I will take the coordinating die, put it around this, and we'll do some partial die cutting. So again, that other piece was just a guide to make sure I put this the place I wanted. Now we only want to cut in this area right here where I'm pointing to now. So I'm going to rotate my card, put it into my die cutting machine. I'm lining up the edge of my cutting plate with that pencil line. Anything under the cutting plate will cut. Anything hanging out on the right side there will not cut. So we're only cutting that little portion of the flower. So I'll run this through my die cut machine. And when I take it out, I'll find that I have that partially die cut. And it's perfect right up against that pencil line. If it doesn't cut completely up against the pencil line, you can use a craft knife to kind of continue it, but it should be good. Next, I'm going to score where that pencil line was at 2 1/8 of an inch. But again, you're only scoring outside of your partial die cutting, so just above and below it. There's also a little part in there where I need to score. Easy to do. I can go ahead and flip this and then reinforce that fold line, and we have the left side of our gatefold card. I used a pretty intricate image. So if I can do it with this, you could do it with even more basic shapes. You could even use standalone dies. So now we have the other side of our card to do. So we have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. I'm opening it. I have a pencil line drawn down the center. I'm taking the guide and lining it up so that I can place my mask into the opening. So I'm just popping it right into place. Again, this is just to make sure I get good positioning. I can then remove my guide and take the coordinating die and pop it over the mask. Once I have that in place, we'll do partial die cutting again. I'll take my cutting plate and put it right along that pencil line. Anything under the plate will cut. If you have a beveled edge cutting plate like I do, still line up the edge with the pencil line. It actually cuts right up to it anyways. So now I can remove the mask and I have my other half. We'll score where that pencil line was, which is 2 1/8 of an inch. Score above and below the image. Then we can flip it and reinforce that fold line. Now this half of the gatefold card is actually exactly like the other. So I could have just done two the same, but I wanted to show how to do the two different ones in case you're using a different image on one side than you are the other. So now these pieces can fit together, but you'll notice that there is again a tiny little gap. So I'm just going to cut a hair off that back piece. This makes all the difference in kind of giving a nice complete look on the front of the card. So now these will meet together in the middle just perfectly, and I can use some strong adhesive to put these together. You could use any kind of double-sided tape or a liquid adhesive. We'll put the backs together, and there we have our perfectly matched interlocking kind of card. So now I'm going to add some stamping. I have the stamp that goes with that coordinating die. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool just because I don't want to mess up at this point. And I'm stamping this with a Copic friendly black ink because I plan to do some Copic coloring for these flowers. When you're lining the stamps up with that coordinating die partial die cut, make sure you look from the side, get your head over the image and to the side so you can be sure that you line it up nicely. Next, I wanted to use a background stamp over this entire card front just to add a little interest. So I'm putting the masks over my stamped images. I probably could have skipped that since the ink I'm using is very light. And by the way, that was Lila saying she loved you all. Okay, so I put this into my stamping tool. I'm tucking the leaves inside so that I can stamp on all of the open white area. I have a new Hero Arts background stamp that's really beautiful. It's the Pattern Lantern stamp. I'm inking it up with Hero Arts soft vanilla ink and stamping that over the card. And you want to put muscle into this because you want to make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. Now I stamped that and decided I didn't want it to be a yellow, but instead wanted it to be more of a cream. So this time I'm stamping with Hero Arts soft sand ink. So I layered the inks together to get the perfect color. Now I can remove the mask and we have our double gatefold card with images on both sides. Now I felt like this needed something on the sides. So I'm trimming about 1/8 of an inch off of both of our little flaps, both of the gatefold flaps. And then I'm going to add red color behind that. So I'm putting down a piece of masking tape, and then I'm running my Copic marker along this edge. This is the same Copic marker that I used to color my flowers, so I know it'll match perfectly. You could instead just glue a strip of cardstock along here if you want to. Now you can see it shows through when folded over. And I did the same for the other side of the card. For a sentiment on this card, I used the Hero Arts Support Prayers and Love stamp set. I've used this in many videos, and the I'm here for you message with by your side on the inside of the card is one of my favorites. So I stamped I'm here for you on the on the outside and by your side on the inside. You can see the red that peeks through on the sides. It kind of finishes off the card, and how the images kind of connect together in the center. So this one took a little bit of effort with that partial die cutting, but I really like the results. If you wanted to save time, You could have just created a gatefold card and then just glued those flower die cuts on top. But I really like the smooth look that this one gives. Okay, so my last card shows how you can create this card to open the other direction. So any of these card designs could be made for either orientation. For this card, I'm using the Hero Arts Textured Leaves stamp set. This is a new one, and I really like the unique texture that you get when you stamp with these. I'll also be using the coordinating dies. I'm starting with a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I'm going to rotate it so it's upside down, open it, and then draw some pencil guidelines on the bottom here. So I decided to draw a pencil line down the center of this part in both directions. The only reason I'm doing in both directions is so that I can easily center my leaves. I have 3 leaves, so I can start with the middle one and center it, and then put the other 2 next to it. Okay, so I have the die for the leaf that I want to use. I'm lining it up at the center of those pencil lines, and we'll do partial die cutting again. I'll line up the edge of my cutting plate with that pencil line, run it through, and it'll only cut under that plate. And there you see our partially die cut leaf. I will repeat this to both sides of that leaves to cut 2 more, and each time I line up the edge of the cutting plate with that pencil line. So you can see how having a coordinating die for your stamp is very helpful when doing partial die cutting. It'd be a little tricky to cut that with a craft knife, but you could do so if you needed to. So here we have our 3 partially die cut leaves. Next, I'll go ahead and erase my pencil lines, and then we can go ahead and add our stamping. So I'm lining up my stamp with those partially cut lines, and I'm stamping my leaves in 3 colors. Hero Arts Soft Olive Ink is the first. After I stamp it, I'm actually going to stamp it again in the same spot with VersaMark ink. Then I can add clear embossing powder to it. This allows me to get a colored heat embossed look. And I wanted these leaves in the center to stand out. I did the same with the other 2 leaves using Hero Arts Royal Red and Dark Rust inks. Okay, so now it's time to score. And remember, you're going to score at 2 1/8 outside of these images. So don't score through the leaves, rather next to them. You'll see me run my bone folder right down the center of the leaves, but I'm not actually pressing there. I'm just trying to make sure that I connect all my score lines. So there we can use the bone folder to reinforce that fold line. Now you may notice when I put these cards together, the flaps kind of pop up, but you can just set something heavy on it and it'll press it down, or it'll actually flatten nicely when it goes to the mail. Okay, now we're making the other half, scoring halfway down the center, reinforcing it with our bone folder, and now we can glue the 2 halves together. I did cut a little bit off that back note card, by the way, just to make sure we don't have a gap, just like I did on the other cards. And there you can see how the 2 parts meet in the middle nicely. Now for the background on this one, I decided to use some of the other leaves from the same stamp set, and I stamped it repeatedly with soft sand ink. I just kind of stamped around those main leaves in the center. This saved me time from having to do any masking. I decided to again cut a little bit off the front flaps, and then I'll add some color behind it that will show through. I wasn't sure what color marker to use, so instead of using a marker, I'm going to use the matching ink. So I'll set up my mask here and just a piece of masking tape, and I'm using the soft olive ink that I used for my middle flower and a little inking sponge to add that color, and I did that on the top and bottom. Between the leaves that I stamped on the background, I added matching little dots with a Copic marker just to fill in some of the blanks. And I added a Happy Autumn sentiment that's from that Hero Arts My Monthly Hero kit. So here you can see how you can do the double gatefold card design in this side orientation. And there's plenty of room to stamp more in the inside or write a personal message. I hope you'll give this double gatefold card design a try. If you are interested in any of the supplies that I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description. Got lots of information down there. You can also check out these other videos in the middle, including a more simplified version of this gatefold card. If you want, you can hit subscribe so you can see more videos. I appreciate the time you spend here, and I hope you have a great week.